Welcome to the Afterglow podcast, a space to practice yoga nidra informed by the ideas of Carl Jung and internal family systems. Each week we will work on a different life theme, giving us the opportunity to discover vast inner landscapes, sitting with all that life has to offer as we explore who we are. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. Hi, and welcome to episode 19, the Midlife Check-In, the Divine Blush. This episode has more of a call to action than I think any of my previous episodes. At the end of this episode, I'm going to read out some questions. I'll also post them on the webpage for this episode so that you can copy and paste them, because I am giving you a series of questions to answer one by one to help you check in with where you are, how you got here, where you want to be, and how to get there. Those aren't the questions. The questions are far more brutal, demanding, and effective. When you get to the end of this episode, you'll not only get the questions, but you'll understand why I am calling it the Divine Blush, and what on earth it has to do with beetroots. And so there will be no Yoga Nidra for this episode, no part 2. The practice, instead, is that you sit with a pen and paper or your keyboard and you go through the questions one by one. There are 11 questions. And you take your time. You do it as a formal midlife check-in. I took about maybe 2 hours to complete the questions. It may take you quicker. And I wanted total privacy and silence to do them, but at best I got noise-cancelling headphones and my phone on airplane mode as life just continued around me. So if you are able to create a nice mood, great. But if not, who cares? The questions are demanding enough that the outer world kind of melts away as you start. Do not dismiss any of the questions thinking, oh, I know the answer, so I can skip it. I find that the ones that you want to skip are the most revealing because it's likely a defense that is making you dismiss the need to answer it. I guess you could voice record your answers by speaking into your phone, but I think there is a power in writing it out with pen and paper or typing on a computer, because as you write it, you read it, you see it in front of you. And that really does make an impression, I gotta tell you. Yes, the questions are hard, but they are really, really worthwhile. And most likely you'll come away with at least one insight that you can action going forward. At least. The questions are taken from a book by James Hollis, a Jungian analyst and very well-respected writer. He writes about how to consider oneself in relation to the life that has already been created and what to do next, with a real focus on midlife as that pivoting point. He has multiple books about middle age, but the book that I'm taking these questions from is called Creating a Life, Finding Your Individual Path. I will say that I have taken some creative license with the questions in that he has presented them in a slightly more messy way in terms of asking them, and they're mixed up with statements and reminders. So I once or twice paraphrase a larger paragraph into something a little bit more bite-sized, and I have structured the list a little bit more than he has, just so that this exercise has a really super simple format and is very easy to understand. I have not changed the questions though. Anyone with a copy of this book will see that they are essentially unaltered, only tidied up. The language is all his. If you'd like to read this book, I highly recommend it. I haven't read his other book on middle age called The Middle Passage, From Misery to Meaning in Midlife. although I will soon be reading it because it is on the reading list of a course that I am doing. I'm going to pause quickly to share some happy news. I was accepted into a year-long Jungian course with a really highly respected Jungian training institute on a full bursary. This is not only very exciting for the ability to work with these lecturers and analysts, but it really helps when applying to do the full training to become an analyst, doing courses like this year-long certificate course. And last night I was putting together the reading list, and it is, in a word, extensive. So, I'm going to give a quick outline of what the point of this exercise is before talking generally about the necessary attitude to have when doing this kind of work. So my elevator pitch for this exercise is that while we each had different childhoods, had more or less effective coping mechanisms when it came to forming a persona to withstand the environment around us, those coping mechanisms are in truth one side of us, and in order to function, we've had to cut off other parts. This shows up in our neuroses, the symptoms that show that there is stuff happening beneath the surface and we want more wholeness and less turbulence. For most of us, we get to middle age, anywhere from 35 onwards, really. And either our unlived life comes rippling up like an earthquake, shaking the relative calm of our lives, or certain patterns have become so intolerable that we cannot stand our lives and we need a new way of being. Or a third, more subtle one, where we just can't quite connect too much because we are so numb or so routinized and things have lost a certain richness. This exercise of going through the questions is an actually useful tool to assess things and to get under the surface enough to see actionable behavioral shifts that we can do to make and to create legitimate change. That's my elevator pitch. In the words of Ira Glass, stay with me. Now, I'm going to talk for a little bit about the attitudes to have when approaching this work. Simply doing the questions is great, but I think talking about the right attitude will entirely elevate the experience. When prepping to write the script, I fully expected that I would be talking a lot about Jung and the life stages, talk about individuation, talk about different cultural perceptions of middle age. But I won't be talking about Jung all that much, except to say that he famously felt that life only really begins at 40, that middle age was a pivotally important life stage, and that self-examination at this time is the difference between a life that is rich with meaning and self-connection and one that is disillusioned, robotic, maybe even fraught with neuroses. In the end, I decided that the best thing to do was talk about a really great book for writers who are wanting to write a memoir. This is because it is a much more practically useful tool for you if you do the exercise that I am offering you by answering these questions. However, if you want to really dive into a midlife self-inquiry through a Jungian lens, then I can suggest reading the following. 1. A subsection of Chapter 8 of Murray Stein's book, Jung's Map of the Soul. The subsection is called The 5 Stages of Consciousness. 2. Jung's memoir, Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. 3 and 4, the 2 James Hollis books that I already mentioned. And 5, the book that I will be talking about and quoting from, that is a memoir for writers, called The Situation and the Story, The Art of Personal Narrative by Vivian Gornick. Before I start, I will say that doing this exercise, it's possible that it brings up a lot of tender feelings, but it will be worthwhile. This time will not be wasted, I can assure you of that. So let's dive in. Recently, I have been having an ongoing conversation with someone very close to me about control and compliments. He shared that he doesn't like receiving compliments on certain parts of himself, but other things he really loves getting complimented on. We pried a bit deeper into this conversation, and after getting some examples from him, I pointed out that it seemed like the things he likes getting compliments on are things he constructs for other people's benefit, and he feels he has a sense of control over. Being seen as funny is the most common one for him. And he doesn't at all like getting compliments on things that he feels are less conscious or less controlled. When someone sees something that he is unconsciously presenting to the world and they compliment him on it, it is unnerving for him. He doesn't like it at all because it is something that is less in control. He is not presenting that as part of his curated persona. I think that this is common of most people. Someone can put a lot of attention into what they wear, wanting their fashion to speak for them, to represent to the world how they see themselves. And that is a truth, but when someone sees them in a regular schmegular outfit and compliments them, it's just as much the truth, but to that person it can feel either like a lie or perhaps like they're being overly exposed. I think that these stories we construct, I'm funny, I'm fashionable, I'm pragmatic, I'm not very emotional, unlike other people. I'm so creative. I can't help but be impressively expressive in all that I do. I'm an introvert. I'm an extrovert. I'll always be broke. I am unlovable. New people are untrustworthy. I am bad at life admin. I need people to tell me what to do. I can't stand being spoken down to by anyone, ever. I hate hypocrisy. I am the life of the party. People need me to be fun. Whatever the story is for you, or stories, most likely, the opposite is also true. The depressed comedian, the power-hungry politician, the teacher who hates children. But these are kind of cartoonish examples. For most people, it is more subtle, like a commitment to a career that you hate because you're in the trap of relying on the money that you get and you have responsibilities to your family. And anyway, what other choices are there? This is life, no? Plus, setting up a side hustle that can become a more fulfilling career takes energy, and I have so little left after working my shitty corporate job. I know as much as anyone the ways in which the economy can affect the job market. I think it is a factor, but I won't get very far if I make that the entire story. I get how people are stuck on that, but I really do think that there are two separate conversations happening. The one is what happened to you, and the other is how can we make meaning out of this, explore ourselves from this, survive this. So let's talk about this book, The Situation and the Story, The Art of Personal Narrative by Vivian Gornick. Essentially, it is a book for writers, but I think anyone would find it a fascinating read because it is a story about reflecting on one's life, on one's self, on the contextual factors that form us and how we understand the situation and how we understand the story. Perhaps my biggest takeaway from this book is that to win the trust of the reader, you have to show that you are not a reliable narrator when it comes to yourself. I think there is something profoundly Jungian in this. We are not always reliable narrators of ourselves, and personally, I want to be friends with people who can tolerate that uncomfortable truth. I don't want my friends to agree that my boss is always micromanaging me and that I'm perfectly within my reason to complain about them endlessly and present myself as being dealt an unfair hand. I want a friend who is empathic, but also asks what I'm bringing to the situation. We tend to hate doing this, and we know that friends won't always stick around if we challenge them. In fact, some people get highly offended if they are challenged even gently. But I think we need to be able to welcome this other side in. What am I bringing to this? Why does every relationship end the same way? Do I have an attitude towards authority? Maybe after investigating this, you realize that you want to be in charge. You want to be making something of your own. I think it is challenging, but it is also empowering. Vivian Gornick refers to this as self-implication. We can write about the sad things that happen to us, the ways our life has been impacted by the world around, but for a more balanced truth to emerge, we need to assess how we have implicated ourselves in this. Have we overly identified with our penny-pinching father and we never go on holiday? Or do we splurge and get into debt to defy our penny-pinching father? Either way, it's a reaction to someone else. It is mostly that it is our parents, or to use therapy speak, our family of origin, that create these reactions. Jung famously asserted that nothing affects the child more than the unlived life of the parent. For some people, it's more traumatic than quirky, penny-pinching fathers. It's violence, addiction, depression that move through the rooms of our childhood homes and become the air that we breathe when we grow up. It is a necessary part of childhood to reject the parents. It is healthy to go through a phase of feeling like you have been beset with the baggage of your parent. Developmentally, it is entirely healthy. But we must also leave that phase when it comes time to do so. To borrow a line from Vivian, we need to see the monster as lonely and the innocent as cunning. How have we upheld unconscious reactions to our family of origin that haunt us today? How are these things stopping us from pursuing something that feels more intrinsically us? And how can we overcome being intimidated by the life we would rather be living? This isn't self-help. This is individuation, as Jung has laid out. This is the magic of Jung, the magic of self-examination, the magic of being able to endure unflattering views of ourselves. Vivian writes, I discovered that I couldn't leave anything of it behind, especially not the woman, most especially not my mother. I had determined to separate myself from her theatrical self-absorption, but now, as the years accumulated, I saw that my hot tempers and cutting ways were indeed only another version of her needy dramatics. I saw further that for both of us the self-dramatization was a substitute for action, a piece of Chekhovian unresolve raging in me as well as in her. It flashed on me that I could not leave my mother because I had become my mother. This was the story I wanted to tell without sentiment or cynicism, the one I thought justified speaking hard truths. The flash of insight I'd had, that I could not leave my mother because I'd become my mother, was my wisdom. A tale of psychological embroilment I wanted badly to trace out. To tell the tale, I soon discovered, I had to find the right tone of voice. The one I habitually lived with wouldn't do at all. It whines. It grated. It accused. Above all, it accused. Then there was the matter of syntax. My own ordinary, everyday sentence, fragmented, interjecting, overriding. That also wouldn't do. It had to be altered, modified, brought under control. And then I could see this as soon as I began writing, that I needed to pull back, way back, from these people and these events to find the place where the story could draw a deep breath and take its own measure. In short, a useful point of view, one that would permit greater freedom of association, for that, of course, is what I have been describing, had to be brought along. What I didn't see, and that, for a long while, was that this point of view could only emerge from a narrator who was me, and at the same time, not me. Vivian is talking about what in childhood Jung referred to as personality 1 and personality 2. I don't want to get too caught up in a Jungian history lesson, but it is in essence that before he formed the ideas of persona and self with a capital S, his child brain understood it as personality 1, the one he presented to the world, his ego-conscious position that determined that is very me, or that isn't very me, or I'm good at this, or I'm not good at this. And his personality 2, which was a near medieval old wise man. There is a balancing out of these positions by having these two personas separated. In multiple chapters throughout James Hollis's book, he refers to all of these ideas, even the concept of self alone, not getting too attached to whether or not it is real with a capital R. These are all tools. These are all concepts that are useful because they function, they have a purpose, they help us get to a different point from A to B. I wouldn't worry too much about trying to mathematically map out a detailed, precise vision of what your personalities are, because that would be maddening. I just think that it's good to have these sort of graspable ideas. And that's what Vivian is doing. She is saying she is the narrator, but another part of her needs to step in, one that has an extracted viewpoint way back and is able to separate out herself from the story and the people. This obsession of this happened to me. There is this balancing act. In Jungian terms, we call it we call these dual natures. We often refer to it as shadow work when we try to get in touch with these other parts of ourselves. Vivian is saying that in order to review the story of her life, in order to separate from her mother, she had to engage another part of herself, another narrator to help her tell the story. That part was always there. It's just as much a part of her. But she has kept it in the shadows because she needed to formulate a persona that could withstand the environment that she grew up in. This can be scary, but like so much of this work, the aura of fear that precedes an encounter with other parts of ourselves or with the self with a capital S, the aura is worse than the actual encounter. Although it is uncomfortable when we do interact with it, that is for sure. We are called at this stage in our life to develop the skill of self-reflecting, of being willing to loosen our grip on who we think we are. James Hollis writes, "Whoever has not attained a self-reflecting ego is at the mercy of complexes and remains in childhood, however powerful in outer life." If you wish to follow the Jungian stages of life or know more about it, there is a later stage when this all rounds out. Middle age isn't the final stage of development or individuation, to use Jungian language. But I want to ask you to imagine that you spend your 20s and 30s being like, okay, this is who I am. I am making a name for myself in this world, whether on a small scale or a big scale. This is me. Then you approach 40 and a faun jumps onto the stage of your life with a finger held high and says, the opposite is also true. And then you explore that in a wonderful discovery of who you are until it all does round out. Or at least that's what I suspect. Back to Vivian, who writes, "With relief, I thought, I am not losing myself. Suddenly I realized there was no myself to lose. I had a narrator on the page strong enough to do battle for me. The narrator was the me who could not leave her mother because she had become her mother. She was not intimidated by alone again. Nor, come to think of it, was she much influenced by the me who was a walker in the city, or a divorced middle-aged feminist, or a financially insecure writer. She was apparently only her solid, limited self, and she was in control. I saw what I had done. I had created a persona. Later in the book she writes, "But memoir is neither testament nor fable nor analytic transcription. A memoir is a work of sustained narrative prose, controlled by an idea of the self under obligation to lift from the raw material of life a tale that will shape experience, transform event, deliver wisdom. Truth in a memoir is achieved not through a recital of actual events. It is achieved when the reader comes to believe that the writer is working hard to engage with the experience at hand. What happened to the writer is not what matters. What matters is the large sense that the writer is able to make of what happened." The task at hand that will be presented to you when you read each question and answer them, you are not writing a memoir. I do not expect for you to take what Vivian is saying as the exact gospel truth of how to craft the overarching story of your life, but rather using the attitude that she is promoting, this attitude of looking at yourself up against the light, of seeing where the shadows fall and adding that into the story. I know that she is not saying those words, I am saying them, but I think that that is in essence what she is suggesting as the primary narrative vehicle to assess who you are. And part of that is, back to what I said earlier, accepting that you are not the most reliable narrator of yourself, while also being the best narrator of yourself. Both things are true. I think for some of us, we experience an earthquake in our lives, often approaching or in middle age, that discloses the truth, and to be brave enough to embrace the new self that emerges, we need to accept that we are implicated in having caused the earthquake. Those of us who have gone through this life earthquake, us earthquake people, the ones who suddenly go through a depression, who get fired or quit in a moment of unconscious rage, reach rock bottom in an addiction, go through a divorce, or find that their needy parent is suddenly completely intolerable. These earthquake people are the lucky ones. I think that to be given an earthquake that shakes the foundations of your life, that opens you up to an enormously generous and regenerative experience of discovering who you are, is an incredible gift. It is harder when we are not forced to do this. It is harder to make the decision to tackle our lives and question how we got here when there is relative peace in our lives. The journey isn't any less meaningful. The cracking open is just as heart wet. But it is significantly harder than when life forces your hand. So if you are listening to this and you are not experiencing an earthquake, but a subtle, if tolerable, disquiet with your life, I want to say directly to you that that is no small feat, and I'm happy for you. Okay. So, just before I read the questions, I want to read one of my favorite quotes, and definitely one of my favorite quotes about beetroots. There is a really great book called Jitterbug Perfume by Tom Robbins, and it includes this wonderful passage at the very end of the book. Often the intro is the quoted passage about beetroots. There are two passages about beetroots, and both the intro and the outro start the same. So the two often get mixed up, but I think that the outro is by far the better one. The beet is the most intense of vegetables. The Onion has as many pages as War and Peace, every one of which is poignant enough to make a strong man weep. But the various ivory parchments of the Onion and the stinging green bookmark of the Onion are quickly charred by belly juices and bowel bacteria. Only the beet departs the body the same color as it went in. Beets consumed at dinner will, come morning, stock the toilet bowl with crimson fish, their hue attesting to beets' chromatic immunity to the powerful digestive acids and thoroughgoing microbes that can turn the reddest pimento, the orangest carrot, the yellowest squash, into a single disgusting shade of brown. At birth we are red-faced, round, intense, pure. The crimson fire of universal consciousness burns in us. Gradually, however, we are devoured by our parents, gulped by schools, chewed up by peers, swallowed by social institutions, wolfed by bad habits, and gnawed by age. And by the time we have been digested, cow style, in those 6 stomachs, we emerge a single disgusting shade of brown. The lesson of the beet, then, is this: hold on to your divine blush, your innate rosy magic, or end up brown. Once you're brown, you'll find out that you're blue as indigo, and you know what that means. Indigo, indigoing, indigon. This is a good lead-in to the questions, because the questions are trying to help you get in touch with that essential beetroot juice inside of you, that divine blush, as Tom Robbins says. The reason that I am calling this episode Midlife Check in the Divine Blush is because, for one, I want to encourage you to keep this image of the color of beetroot as a symbol for something essentially you, something that is divine and cannot be washed out of you. I also think that the work that you will do when you answer these questions will make you blush. It's humiliating to see how much we have lived our life in service to someone else, mostly one or both of our parents. It is humiliating to see how much of our choices have impeded us, even when we think we have made entirely reasonable, rational choices. It is sad how intimidated we are by our own potential, and how much that really fucking sucks when we are in a hole, and the only way out is to do something entirely scary and maybe even embarrassing, like being ourselves. Jung says that any encounter with the self is uncomfortable, humiliating, an attack to the ego. We don't want to engage with this version of us because we've spent so much time and energy denying it or pushing it away. So I say divine blush, because I invite you to have an intimate moment with yourself in asking these questions, a moment in your life when you can feel the heat in your cheeks as you look at the situation and the story, as you figure out how you are implicated in the story of your life and what you're going to do about it. The questions. Number 1. In what way am I carrying the unlived life of each of my parents? I recommend having a section for each parent, whether you had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 if you had step parents as well. It helps to create a little bit of clarity. 2. Where am I stuck, blocked, as each or either of my parents are blocked? 3. Where am I caught in a compensation which, though it may be productive for me and others, shackles me to the consequences of someone else's life? 4. How am I perpetuating the worldview, strategies, the behaviors of my mother, of my father? Where do they show up like unwelcome flashes in my intimate relationships, in my relationships with my own children, in a way that feels sometimes inescapable and unnervingly familiar? Such shadow work is humiliating, but necessary to find freedom to move elsewhere. 5. Where is the spontaneous child I once was? None of us have a chance of living all diverse dimensions of potentials, especially when we consider the narrow tribal gate through which all children are obliged to pass through, further limiting our choices and range. A side note from me, think of the beetroot. 6. Where is the unlived life which haunts me, summons me, and intimidates me? We may be frightened by the scope of the unlived life, but it is more frightening to have stayed stuck in a life of no consequence and no contribution. 7. Where am I asking others to take responsibility for my life? 8. What part of myself do I need to get to know better in order to feel more complete, to have not simply been a visitor here? 9. What agenda is now demanding my attention? 10. What growing up do I have to achieve? 11. What security, old identity, relationship, pathology do I need to leave behind? I will include these questions written down in the show notes, and if you can't copy and paste them and you would like to, head to my website where you will definitely be able to copy them. Go to alacapella.co.uk/midlife check-in. Midlife check-in is all one word. Godspeed with this exercise. May it bring you closer to yourself and help you make life choices that reflect your divine blush. Good luck and take heart. Thank you for adding your light and kindness to the world and for doing this important inner work. May the afterglow be as bright as the journey is deep. See you soon.